Hey everyone, how's it going? Welcome to the first episode of what I'm going to call Failed Weapons, where we look at weapons that, well, failed. These failures can be due to some aspects of the weapon itself or the world around it. The central theme is that they're weapons that failed in some significant capacity. I figured we would start this out by looking at a Civil War era weapon that has been largely forgotten about. We're going to be looking at what is known as the Tarpley Carbine. Now, unfortunately, I do not have one to hand to show off, and that's mainly because they're insanely expensive and very rare. Only 400 or so were made, and according to an auction I found from 2016, they sell for tens of thousands of dollars on the very rare occasion that one goes up for sale. But we do have pictures of the few that do exist, so they'll have to do. The Tarpley Carbine, made by J. H. Tarpley between 1863 and 1864, was a direct product of Confederate difficulties at making and procuring new weapons for the war effort. As the Civil War began, the Union enacted a naval blockade on the southern United States to prevent the Confederacy from receiving goods from Europe and other countries. As the war progressed, it became more and more difficult for the Confederacy to bypass the blockade, and only the smallest ships carrying very little in cargo could actually evade Union ships. This meant that very little in foreign goods was reaching the Confederacy. Considering that the Confederacy imported some 300,000 plus arms from Europe, the blockade had a major impact in their ability to arm themselves in a prolonged war. This meant that they needed to increase the number of arms they domestically manufactured, no small task considering that the Southern economy was mostly based around agriculture, so industrial production was comparatively lacking. This led the Confederacy to all kinds of desperate measures like melting down church bells, alcohol stills, and any metal they could get their hands on to make comparatively crude weaponry. This, of course, is where something like the Tarpley Carbine comes in. Allegedly simple enough to make without industrial equipment and with just a hand file, the Tarpley Carbine was somewhat similar to the Sharps rifle in that it was a breech loader. Produced by J. F. Garrett and Company in Greensboro, North Carolina, consisting of just a wood stock, a brass frame, and the barrel, the Tarpley Carbine was incredibly simple and bare bones. The gun would be loaded via a side-hinged breech lock, as shown here, with a 13mm bullet in a paper cartridge. Apparently, the gun was rather accurate at a distance, and while it could not compete with the accuracy of the Sharps, it may have given the Confederacy their own substandard version of the Sharps that was much easier to produce. So, given that just around 400 of the Tarpley Carbine were made, what happened? Why didn't the Confederacy adopt the Tarpley Carbine on any real scale? Better yet, why didn't the Confederate cavalry adopt it, as its short total length at just 40 inches made it optimal for riding horseback? Was this a result of Confederate production issues or something more? As it would turn out, it would be a combination of Confederate production issues and just plain poor design. Let's start with the most minor issue here. Now, take a look at the gun again. Do you notice anything strange about it? Specifically, look around the barrel. If you haven't noticed already, the gun has no forearm, forestock, forend, whatever you want to call it. It has no front grip. Even though the gun was quite short, you would still prefer something to hold on to help balance it and steady your aim. The only real way to do this would be to hold the barrel itself, which was less than ideal to say the least. This would probably be much less of an issue for cavalry soldiers who would likely have riding gloves on, but still having to hold the hot gun barrel to steady your aim is still pretty bad design. However, this wasn't the biggest issue with the gun. Instead, we have to look at the frame where the breech lock is. The problem lies in the whole lock aspect of the breech lock. Because of the rather poor machining capabilities of the Confederacy, and recall how this gun could allegedly be made with just a file, the whole lock aspect of the breech lock was, at best, subpar and, at worst, abhorrent. The lock sealing off the barrel was often faulty, and when fired, some of the explosive gas and energy would leak through the lock, blasting the shooter in the face with hot gas. Also, the escaping gas would decrease the power of the round fired, since it meant that less gas is pushing the bullet towards the end of the barrel, giving it less energy. Even worse, however, was the fact that the gas that was escaping was very corrosive. This meant that with each successive shot, the breech lock would get progressively worse, letting out even more gas over time. This, in turn, would make the gun more unpleasant to use over time, with more and more hot gas being shot at the user, and it would also decrease the power of each successive shot. Even though the Confederacy was desperate for more guns, because of all these issues that the gun had, they still shied away from using the Tarpley Carbine. Of the 400 or so that were made, some 150 of them would make their way to Mississippi. The rest would be either sold to soldiers in North Carolina or regular citizens for their own personal use. In this regard, the Tarpley is rather unique in that it is the only Confederate-made firearm that was ever sold directly to the public. Regardless, the Tarpley would eventually be largely forgotten and lost, with just 20 of the 400 original known to still exist. Apparently 9 of them are in private collections, and the other 11 are in various museums around the world. And with that, I'll go ahead and end the video. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. I do plan on making more videos about failed weapons, so look out for them. If you enjoy some other things about history, why not look at a few of my other videos, where I look at, let's say, how the Nazis got their name, and various historical oddities. Maybe you'll like them too. I hope you'll watch my next video, and I hope you learned something from this one. See ya!